Secrets of domain leasing. So we will cover not only the secrets of domain leasing, but we will cover the essentials of domain leasing as well. And so with me today, I have three gentlemen who are more handsome than I, starting there on the end with Stevan Lieberman.
Bachelor number one.
Exactly. So Stevan Lieberman, and then next up is Jeff Sass, and then last but not least, Victor Pitts. And so gentlemen, I will give you the next 15 seconds or so, starting with Stevan, to introduce yourselves.
Steve Lieberman, Greenberg and Lieberman. We're an intellectual property law firm, and we're here to help you make sure you get your domain sales and your domain transactions done, whatever it needs to get done. We also run escrow domains as well as Wild-Fish.
Jeff Sass, I'm the CMO of .club domains. We're the registry operator for the .club extension, but in the context of this panel, we also operate a platform called Names.club, which is a marketplace for premium domains of new TLDs, not just .club. We have MMX names, we have .shop, and others soon, and we offer financing for those names.
And my name is Victor Pitts, and I'm in charge of the premium domain program at Minds and Machines. MMX is the more common name for it now. We have 25 plus TLDs, including .bear. And so if anyone wants to buy me a beer later on, I can tell you more about it. I'd be happy to do that. But I have, we're not doing any sort of domain leasing, so I guess the reason that I'm invited to this platform is because of my experience in the domain industry going back quite a ways, and involved in structuring many leasing deals and guiding people to leasing solutions.
So thank you for joining us today. And so to kick things off, and this is an open question, obviously we hear phrases like ultra and premium when it comes to domain names, but what truly qualifies a domain to be suitable for domain leasing?
I mean, our attitude at Names.club is that any premium name, any great brandable premium name that's about $1,000 or more is suitable for financing, because we think that, especially when it comes to a startup or an entrepreneur that's starting out or a small business, anything that makes it easier for them to take advantage of a great premium name is useful. And writing a check even for $3,000 or $5,000 up front versus paying $35 or $40 a month over 5 years is a big difference to a growing small business.
And I would say that words such as ultra and premium, these are just words. What really counts is what the buyer is willing to pay. In my view, a name that would be considered for leasing is one in which the future value of the name is going to be greater than what the present value is, or at least equal to it. But it certainly, you wouldn't want to lease on a name where the future value is going to be less than the present value, because that's the transaction you most likely want to sell.
And I can tell you that at escrow domains, we've seen domain leases as low as $500 and as much as $20 million. So it goes all over the place.
And just to add on to what Victor said, it's not just about the value of the domain from an investment perspective, because again, if you put yourself in the eyes of a small business, if you're paying a monthly fee, then it's something that maybe you can afford out of cash flow. So it's not about the value of the domain in the future, it's about making it more affordable to use that domain right now for your business.
And so we talk about and we hear phrases, or rather the numbers from the lower end of the scale to the upwards into the millions. And so one of the things that I think about in terms of like car leasing and leasing buildings is, how long should a domain lease be? We talk about the value, but really, what should that length of time be?
You want the lease to be with an entity it's going to be around. We have some domain leases that are just 6 months, and we actually have one that's a 20-year lease right now. Obviously, if it's a longer lease and it's of a very high value, both the buyer and seller have to come to an agreement that they're willing to accept those payments and what those particular terms are.
As a marketplace at Names.club, we've tried to make it very simple and uniform. So all of the easy payment plans are for 5 years, 60 months, and there's no interest. So it's very straightforward. And we don't really treat it as a lease in that there's no obligation. It's much more like a subscription. So you can stop paying at any time with no penalty. Obviously, you don't get any money back, but you're not on the hook for the balance of the amount. And you just walk away from the name at any time, and we just take the name back. So it's a little bit more like a subscription. You stop paying for your magazines, they don't show up in the mail anymore. You stop paying for your name, you can't use it, but you're not on the hook. So if you were leasing or financing a $10,000 name, and you were $2,000 into it, decided to change your mind, you don't have an obligation for that remaining $8,000. You can walk away from it with no penalty.
And usually you see the leases are going to be 10 years or less than 10 years, and that's because one of the reasons is the maximum amount of a renewal is going to be 10 years. But there are ways, work with a good attorney to take and do up a good contract, and you can handle those kinds of situations. But maximum contract for ICANN is 10 years. So most leases I see are 10 years or less.
Gotcha. So what are favorable conditions for both the seller and buyer in terms of leasing? Explain that a bit.
Conditions are everything, basically anything you can imagine. The buyer and the seller can come to an agreement where the money comes back, the money is held by the escrow company. There's conditions where it's a lease to buy where there's interest, and where sometimes the amount of money that's put into the lease goes against the actual sale, and sometimes it doesn't. In the end, it comes down to negotiation of the contract, and you want to get the best terms for yourself when you're going through it. Obviously, most sellers want to make it so that it's non-refundable, and that there is no transfer of any rights to the domain name. Whereas the buyer wants the opposite side of things. The other thing you always have to consider is what's going to happen during the period of the time of the lease. What sort of things can the person who is leasing it actually do with the domain name? Are there any things that they cannot do with it?
Yeah, with the buyer, the advantage to the buyer is obviously you take possession of the name, use it now, and keep your cost aligned with, say if it's a startup organization, keep your cost aligned with the growth of the business, as opposed to having a big capital outlay up front. From a seller's perspective, the seller, if the seller believes that the name is going to be worth more in the future, as I said before, it's going to have a higher future value, then that is a name that you would maybe want to not give up on the ownership aspect of it. So you would want to possess it as an asset, but take some income now, especially if it's not something that you're going to be using in the foreseeable future. Then get some income for it, so put it onto a lease. If you believe that the value is, the future value is at some risk, it may go down because of the kind of name that it is, or the industry that it's associated with. Whatever your belief is, that the future is that name may be worth less, then again, the leasing situation is not something that you'd want to consider. If you have an offer right now, capitalize upon the offer now, or go to financing, but I think selling it would be a better option.
Yeah, at Names.Club, we keep it very straightforward and simple. So the buyer pays 15% as a down payment, so they have some commitment into it. So if it's a $1,000 name, they're paying $150, and then they make their 60 monthly payments, and there's no interest on those payments. And you can prepay at any time. So if you are a domain investor, and we've had this happen on a number of occasions, you can be paying for a name monthly. Now you find a buyer for the name. All you owe us is the balance of our price. You pay that off at any time, and then you can transfer the name to the new buyer, and you keep the profit. So recently someone was paying monthly for a $3,000 name, so their monthly payments were $33 a month or something, and they found a buyer for that name for $7,000, so they had paid in about $500 at the time made that sale. So they just paid us the balance, $2,500, and they kept the $4,000 profit.
So then, tell me then, how are sellers able to, identify a realistic value for a given domain? Obviously, this is one of the age-old questions in terms of domains. They're appraising values and such, but again, are there tools that are out there on the market, or how does a seller go about, determining a realistic lease value?
A lot of people like using the automated systems. Esteban, GoDaddy has a good system for coming up with a base value. That's a good place to start if you don't really know where it's at. Obviously, some buyers are going to value the domain because of who they are and what they are at a higher value. And you're also, if you're going to do a lease, the lease is going to be a higher value than the actual cost of paying for the domain name in cash. We have one company right now that is doing a lease, and that lease is for a certain amount of cash plus a percentage of profit. And we do an audit every year on the company in order to be able to value how much money they've actually come in and profit, and the leasing company gets a percentage of that. So you can see that the value is not just on the domain, but also in that case, it's on the value of the company itself and what it's going to bring in here.
As far as estimating the value, everybody's looking for some formula that you can apply your name to, and it's going to produce some number that the whole world's going to agree to, and it just does not exist. All the algorithms, they're just formulas, but they don't always come up with the results that make any sense. And you can just throw different kinds of combinations of names that that you've seen that have sold for more or less, and put them into the equation or put them into the formula and see what the results are. You can see they're just out there. So you can use that as a baseline, and I do too. Sometimes it's a great way to screen and see what's the value. But if it's your name that you're talking about, you hopefully are a bit familiar with what that value proposition is of that name, or what that name represents to people in that market. And you have some understanding of the size of that market and typical marketing budgets, and so you go through a process of guesstimating what they would be willing to pay, and you start with that and start a negotiation process then with the buyer. Now, if the buyer's in agreement that the name is worth that, but they don't have the cash to buy it, or they're just getting started and they need to reserve a certain amount of money to take and run the business, do other kinds of marketing, and can't spend it all on the domain name, this is where leasing and financing and stuff becomes real attractive. But there is no formula that you can apply to pricing domains. Some people will look at the advertisement spend in the market, use tools like SpyFu, Google AdWords, guesstimate, or see how much they're spending cost per click, guesstimate how much traffic that it has, what the typical click-through rate would be for a name such as that, and you try to come up with a price. But even then, it doesn't matter, because if the buyer's not using it that way, or it is, just doesn't agree to the pricing, then it doesn't really matter. But I think that you kind of you do look at those things to kind of get you in the ballpark, but you have to actually do some thinking and analysis of how the name might be used, what industries it might be there for, and how strongly the name would position someone from an identity standpoint against others in the market space.
Yeah, pricing, as a marketplace at names.club, every name has a list price, and you see exactly what the down payment would be and what your monthly payments would be. And right now, all of our inventory is from registries like .club and GMO and MMX, but we're getting ready to open it up for third parties to list their names as well. So if you have a portfolio, you would be able to list it. And then when it comes to pricing in a marketplace, you want to take into consideration whatever fees and commissions are being paid, and so that you price your name so that the net amount you're going to receive is an amount that you are comfortable with.
What's a typical price charge for that?
So in terms of we have a broker network, and the brokers typically get a 15% commission if they're attached to the sale. And then we take, as the platform, we take over time another 15%, which includes the cost of the credit card fees and everything else. So basically, we tell people when you're listing a name to assume that you're going to net 70% of your asking price. So you price it with that in mind. You know, and then of course, if it's being financed and it's getting monthly, you're going to be receiving a stream of monthly payments for as long as the person keeps paying. And if they stop paying, then the name will revert back to you, and you'll be the owner again. You can list it for sale all over again.
Good deal. So then we come to an agreement, we find a domain, we find, I guess, a leasing value payment schedule. Then technically, how is a domain lease facilitated?
It always comes down to a contract. Because all leases is a contract. And there's a lot of canned leases out there that you can use. If you just Google them, they'll sort of come up. A lot of the companies put out leases. I know Lieberman, we've got some sample leases on our site as well. But in the end, it's a negotiation, and you want to come up with the terms and conditions. I always tell people in a more complicated lease, you're going to come out and start out with an LOI, a letter of intent, which is just a list of the terms that both sides are going to agree to. But once people agree to that, you sign the LOI, and then you turn around and turn it into a regular contract. If it's a complicated lease, you're going to want to use an attorney, someone like me or some of the other attorneys in the group, and ask them to create the contract for you. You're probably not going to want to create the lease yourself under those terms. If it's a very simple lease, you can go to like escrow domains. We have in our terms and conditions, you can just say, I'm going to start a lease. It goes on and use our standard terms and conditions in the process. And lay out your terms there. You can even upload addendums and online modifications from that point of view.
So we keep it very simple, again, as a marketplace. So when you register a name from names.club that you're financing, we set up the name in an account at a registrar. Currently we're using Hexonet. So that name is in an account, and that account has a server lock on it. So as the buyer, you have access, you get a login to that account, and you can change the DNS. So you have control of where the domain points, but you can't transfer the domain out of that account until it's paid in full. So if you wanted to sell the name to someone else, or you wanted to take full possession of it, you would pay whatever the remaining balance is, then that server lock is removed, and you can transfer the name to any registrar account that you want to. So it's a pretty simple, clean system that gives you complete control over using the domain, and then protects the owner of the domain from it being transferred away until it's paid for in full. And during the finance period, which is typically 5 years, there are no renewal fees. So included in your monthly payments is any annual renewal fees.
Yeah, there's, domain leasing's been going back, quite some time. And the key to making it work is to protect both the buyer and the seller, is to allow the buyer, or the leasee to be able to access DNS. So you put it onto a platform where they can have DNS control, but they don't have the ability to come change contact records. And as Jeff was just saying, you don't have the ability to transfer out. So the leasee has to have some sort of access, because they got to control things like, where does it point, which IP addresses it points to, email, all those kinds of things that they're going to want to do with it. But not to be able to do anything, it's going to require ownership or a change, and then have the lesser try to track that thing down or chase it down. So there are other services that are out there too, just to be candid. I know Epic has a system that will allow you to do this as well. Many of the escrow services have this as a provision also for putting the name into escrow and protecting both the buyer and the seller, or the lesser and the lessee, for the term. So, shop around, but the names.club solution's a package thing, and it works really good. But it has all those kind of control functions in there, which is what you would want to look for.
So then building on those examples, then how should domain leasing parties guard against either party acting in a way that devalues the domain?
Again, it comes down to the contract. If you, we had one contract where they specifically said that when you put any porn on the site, and actually they ended up in that particular one I'm thinking about putting porn on the site, and that was a breach of the contract. And they emailed us at Escrow Domains and said they breached the contract. Go look yourself. We looked. We saw there was porn up on the site. It was a breach of contract. We emailed the other party and they said you breached. You're losing all the money and you're losing rights to the domain. In the end, you really just have two parties making a deal. And the only way you can stop that from doing that is if there's some sort of either agreement and then you have a third party like Escrow Domain sort of watching it, converting it in, or if you have some mechanical method to do it. And there aren't really very many mechanical methods once the DNS is appointed, because then they have control over the web page.
Yeah, I think similarly, it's very important to have your terms of use or your agreement clearly state what is and isn't appropriate content for the domain to be used for, and we have that in our agreements. In addition, it's part of the reason why we added a down payment to the process, because we feel like having the buyer put something up front more than the monthly payment is going to also reduce the likelihood of them abusing that domain and risking losing it. And then lastly, we do have a system in place to monitor the live sites periodically and just keep an eye on them, especially if it's a high value name. We'll try to monitor it actively and just keep an eye on it as well.
Yeah, well, absolutely the platforms are important for handling this stuff, like the can't transfer the name out, you lock it down. The rest of the stuff really comes down to contract. And there are some other things on contract that you have to look out for. One of the other domain attorneys in the industry, Zach, he wrote a little piece some time back and identified something that was pretty interesting I hadn't really thought of before, was if the company that's doing it, the person doing the leasing, were to apply for a trademark while you own the name and confuse the issue because of usage and trademark and so forth. And he says that's one of the things that you might want to address in the contract to protect yourself in the event that they go and apply for a trademark using the name that you haven't been using, but they've been using under this agreement. So definitely consult with your attorney and make sure you just go over everything to lock it down, because you're talking about valuable property. This is an asset, and again, the presumption is you're doing one where the future value is going to be more. So make sure that you are protecting not just the mechanical things such as the transfer away, but you're also addressing things such as usage, and there's some technology you can apply to that to kind of monitor it. But it really comes down to, okay, what if you do it? What's the consequences, and what do I have as far as options? But other things such as trademark is another thing that you want to look at. So early termination, they stop paying, all those kinds of things are some of the risks that you want to deal with in the contract, with what the consequences would be.
We have typically in a lot of our contracts that if the contract is breached or if they don't finish paying, that all the intellectual property that we copyrights and trademarks will be sheet back to the original owner, which is a pretty standard term and works well.
So what do you do in terms of, like email marketing and SEO? So someone starts this lease, they built this, just like you said, the intellectual property, but are there things within that agreement that say, hey, you can't consult with a search marketing firm, or you can't deal with any email marketing automation or any of that? Have there been instances where those have been included?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, those are things that would be, if you're running an online business and you've got to have SEO. So I don't see where there would be any sort of limitations or restrictions on usage regarding that. One of the things is whatever SEO work that they're doing, which is increasing backlinks and you know, reputation and those kinds of things that are important in the SEO world are going to increase the traffic, you know, from the search engines theoretically to the website. And if the name is not required at the end of the lease, if you take back the name, and that's a benefit that you have with additional traffic that's coming in. On the email, I think the thing you'd have to look for is, back again to the contract, is things that would be in line with spamming and doing something that's going to get you blacklisted, which is hurting the reputation of the name and putting some future restrictions on how effectively that name can be used, and that you would want to deal with in the contract to protect yourself.
I agree. I mean, they have to be able to use the domain name, and obviously email is one of the most important parts that's associated with the domain. You can't tell somebody, here's my business card, but don't email me there, email me somewhere else. It just doesn't work.
My Gmail address.
There you go.
And most people are good, you know, citizens in this space. I mean, we have currently over 160 names that are being financed like that, and we haven't, you know, some of them going into their second year, and we haven't experienced any issues along these lines. Needless to say, we want to be prepared for it, and the agreements protect us, but generally speaking, it's going very smoothly.
So then looking forward in terms of where we're at, obviously .com and most of the legacy extensions have been in play for 30 years or more. Then obviously we introduce new top-level domains into the picture, and so does that create a more or less favorable environment for domain leasing?
Well, obviously, we're biased a little bit with names.club currently focusing on a lot of the new TLDs, but I think the more opportunity there is for a great premium domain name that's brandable for a business, the more opportunity there is for leasing those names. So, you know, we want to support small businesses. We believe that really financing and leasing the way we're doing it is the way small businesses and entrepreneurs want to get premium names. And we're actually powering that service not just at names.club, but for registrars. So Namecheap launched a few months ago, so you can finance through names.club a number of $5,000 and more names at Namecheap. Cedo, we haven't formally announced it yet, but Cedo just launched the capability at Cedo to finance names through names.club. So we really believe that that's the way to get more good quality, brandable, premium names in the hands of small businesses. So we're very bullish on it, and the opportunity to get great brandable names with new TLDs just increases the inventory.
I think that, you know, when all the new TLDs, and I work for a registry, but I mean, one of the reasons there are more TLDs available is giving people more choices, and giving them more choices in part because the price of domains for the better domains were getting so high that it was making it very difficult for young businesses to get started and acquire a good property. So there is, when you increase supply, you know, if supply grows faster than demand, then you're going to have some depression on pricing. So the valuation might go down just a little bit with some of the names because there's so many names to choose from. Why do I want to go spend $100,000 when I got a name where I can get for $5,000 that suits me well and it works the same? So there's that. Having said that, within each TLD, premium names within each of those will bubble to the top, and premium names that bubble to the top, you still are faced with a decision: do they have the cash to come forward with it, or do they want to put this on a lease instead? Another reason for the leasing, and back up to that, is some people would want, or some companies would rather, you know, not when it's a certain price, and you buy the name, then you're treating it as an asset and capital appreciation and so forth. But if it's under a lease, then you can write off as an operating expense, and it hits the accounting books in a different sort of way. So, but I think that the valuation or the more names just spreads out the kinds of names that the leasing will be applicable to.
I don't really have much else to add. I mean, we've been doing leasing for frankly, you don't know what the person who wants to make a lease, who wants to buy the domain, what their motivations is. They're going to come back and they're going to say, I need this domain and I don't want to pay a lot for it up front, so I'm going to get into a lease. If it works for their business plan, yeah, it's going to move over.
They may have just like a plan for their business that's going to operate for this period of time. It's a 5-year plan, and that's how long we think that we'll run this business for. They have specific use that they want for that name during that period of time. So then it really comes down to name selection and price, and apply the leasing model to it.
I open the floor. Are there any questions?
That's also a contractual issue. We've built into a lot of the cases, and in fact most of the leases that we've done, the person who is leasing the domain name is responsible for those costs, and we put an indemnification agreement into it saying that they have to pay that. One of the problems obviously with that is if they don't have the money to do the defense, the other person is in danger of losing that domain. There are options with some insurance companies to actually obtain insurance in order to protect against those sort of things. Business plan. I don't remember the exact policy you need, but I've seen a number of people get insurance policies to cover those actual costs, and they build that into the cost of the actual lease so that there's a payment plan on that as well.
Okay, so
Great question.
that's actually dependent on platform or whatever service you use to handle the lease program.
I don't know if their platform has anything like that. I've seen that in larger leases. We typically will write leases on paper, classic, attorneys get both parties to sign it, and that's one of the elements that's often discussed is risk. It tends not to be a risk with lower cost domain names, but we've seen a number of multi-million-dollar domain names where that is something that is discussed and insurance is absolutely required.
Yeah. Actually, what triggered that question was I saw a discussion on name codes like 3 days ago where somebody was asking about that. I think somebody from Esper.com mentioned their holding program holds the seller responsible.
Can't comment on Esper.com, but they can.
Yeah, so we put it back to the seller. The main reason for that would be that, in theory, the buyer would be able to just say, "Well, I'm not touching it. And I might not have the money, as you said, to defend it. Might not have the seller's best interest at heart if it's earlier on in the period. However, we do have exceptions in there for fair use. So where the use by the buyer is the thing that's caused the UDRP to be an issue. But in general, we would hold it to the seller.
You remember, just because someone thinks that can bring up another dispute. One side could say, your actions caused the UDRP. The other side says, no, it didn't. And just as somebody's filing a UDRP or a federal litigation pertaining to the domain name, doesn't mean the person that's doing the filing is correct under any circumstances. It's just a claim. So again, you're coming really down to negotiation. The person who's really going to lose is the person who's leasing the domain name. And obviously the risk changes as you get through the lease, especially if it's a lease where the money that is in the lease is being applied to the total sale at the end, and that would be a lease to buy. Sometimes, of course, if it's just a pure lease and there's no option to buy at the end or anywhere along the way, then the risk is by definition on the lessor, unless there's something that will force the lessee to come up with those damages, maybe an indemnification clause or an insurance plan, or maybe a combination of those two. Or we actually even saw another time where the lessor put 3 other domain names into into escrow to cover the costs, even though they get to, in case something happened, even though they have to continue to use those 3 domain names. So you can really come up with a lot of really new and innovative ways of covering those costs. But you really have to think about all these different points up front.
Any other questions? Yes.
I'm just curious, and this is nothing about secrets. I imagine Mr. Sass has answered the lead talk club. But as someone, a newcomer to the new TLD market, are there any about which you're particularly excited or about which you feel is particularly promising domain names to kind of, whether for leasing or not, something you just expect to do well? I'm asking if you have a favorite, essentially, if you were betting on a domain name in a horse race.
In a dog horse race, that would be.
Well,
I know it's kind of silly, that was substantively silly, but I've been wondering for the past 10 minutes, I wonder if they favor one over another. Totally unbiased.
Reality is, again, you know, every domain name is unique. I mean, that's one of the wonderful things about domain names. They're just sort of like real property. And what's a wonderful domain name for one person is really going to be horrible for another person, depending on their particular situation and their business plan and, you know, all these other factors. And if you're an investor, you're going to say, all right, what are the type of groups or people I'm going to go after and that you think are going to be able to get the highest value for, and that's not just dependent upon what other people are going to buy it for, but also how much can you buy it for. I remember when I first got out of law school that there was this property that was downtown Chinatown, and I could buy it for like $35,000. And my significant other said, no way, I am not buying a house there under any circumstances. We'll die by walking to it. Now, go back, now here we are 25 years later, and you can buy that property for $2 million. You don't know what the future holds. And it would have been great to buy the property, but then I couldn't have bought the house I'm in now. So, pros and cons.
yeah, it's a real hard question to answer because, you know, we each have our own personal likes, preferences, and then who we work for.
Yeah.
So I will kind of stick to the party line here because it's the true one, is that it really, each of these names has a certain intended market, and then there's always those markets that you didn't think about that, you know, people would use the name and fall in love with it, and that's the only one they could use. So I don't think that there is no favorite TLD. In terms of where you might see the most leasing being done, though, it will be on the premium names within any one of those markets. And the markets that have are the TLDs that are aligned with markets where there is the most dollars, the most business, the highest value, the most gain from having a great domain name. Those are the ones where I think you're going to see the most leasing activities transpire.
And I think when it comes to premium names, you know, high value names, virtually every extension, even ones that don't have lots of registrations, have a few names that are just so semantically perfect, where the right side and the left side of the dot work together to make a common phrase or a meaningful expression, that those are good, valuable names, regardless of how the TLD as a whole is doing. So I think every extension has its handful of awesome names, right? Just they sound great, they're gonna work well, those are gonna have value. Outside of that, we generally like the extensions that are what we call them generics with meaning. So they're not purely generic, but they reach a broad crowd, but they also add some meaning, you know, to the right of the dot. So club fits in that category. Dot shop fits in that category. There's a lot of names that fit into that category where they're generic enough that they can have widespread use, but they're also meaningful. So they add some meaning to the other side of the dot.
Well, I imagine that
question. So has anyone ever,
Yes.
have you ever experienced or witnessed a website that was fully developed, it being leased?
Meaning leased after it was developed, or someone leased the name and then developed it? Okay.
Absolutely, we have probably 30 or 40 of those in escrow right now. It happens all the time, people build out websites, those websites are technically businesses, because oftentimes they have revenue, and then you're leasing not just the domain name, you're leasing the Twitter handle, and the Facebook, and the Pinterest, and even some of the business assets. But it happens very, very often, and it's a regular thing that we see all the time.
And with that, we are out of time, and so I want to thank the panelists for their time and for their insight today. So give them a round of applause. And that concludes this panel. Thank you.